Welcome back to Dev Odyssey, a developer's journey through IT, where I cover tutorials, reviews of IT tools and technology. I'm your host, Orst, and today we are continuing our Postman Advanced series with Postman API. Prior to this video, we had looked at Postman Newman, which is an automation framework that you can invoke via a command line or a Node.js script. Its real big, powerful uses, in my opinion, are through using it with continuous integration or continuous development pipelines. They are really helpful in that way where you can automate your test runs after your test builds and do what you need after any results. So that's really powerful. I recommend looking at that video. You'll see a link to the right of me. Additionally, if you're just getting started with advanced concepts of Postman, I'd recommend starting from the beginning of this playlist. Again, check the link to the right. And lastly, if you're just fresh with Postman, I would say get started on the introduction series. And again, you'll see that to the right of me. So to get started on Postman API, Postman's API is a RESTful API. So that meaning it is stateless, and generally the concepts of REST are really well implicit within Postman's API. They do a very good job. It is a CRUD type API, like most RESTful APIs. So that is create, read, update, delete, or if I'm putting in HTTP terms, create being post, read being get, update being put or patch, and then delete being delete. In order to really get a good overview of Postman, we'll just go through their documentation that they have here. A quick note on that this is, they have their own documentation engine. And so you'll notice how it looks very clean and well put together, at least in my thoughts. So this is something that they have their own documentation engine on. So when you actually build your own APIs, you can create documentation that looks just like this automatically, all pulled from configurations from your Postman collections. We'll cover that in another video. So to get started with Postman API, we first need an API key. We can go ahead and go to our Postman dashboard, and within our workspace, we can find our integrations and go ahead and create an API key there. Additionally, we have, this is just talking about doing 301 redirects. It will perform that. Responses are sent in JSON, so very common. The 5 here is talking kind of about like RESTful ways of using Postman API. So request meaning get implies that you want to fetch, read, post, save something, create. The API call responds with the appropriate HTTP status codes. Again, this is the same thing of it's RESTful as well. So 200s being okay, 400s being client errors, 500 generally being server errors. And lastly, the unique IDs that are generated in Postman are a combination of 2 unique identifiers. The first one being your user identifier, and the second one being a collection identifier. So a whole unique identifier for a collection is your user ID and the collection ID itself. And so we'll get into that when we actually start consuming the API. And then lastly, we talked about using the API key for authentication. There's 2 ways you can do that. If you put the API key in the header with the header tag named x-API-key, that'll authenticate you. Additionally, if you're using Newman and you don't really have a way of putting a header in there, you add the API key to the end of the as a query parameter, and that'll also authenticate you as well to your API. So now that we've really gotten to look over this, we're going to go ahead and go to our dashboard within our web dashboard and create ourselves an API key. So here, you just choose your workspace. You go to integrations. We'll browse our integrations and we can do view details here for Postman's API. So I'd like to note real quick that Postman API is not the only integration that Postman has. They have quite a few different integrations. So you can use things like Dropbox for saving collections. You can use GitHub as well for source control with collections, and many other ones as well, such as Microsoft Teams or Slack. So when you need to notify, let's say if a monitor fails or a run fails, you could do that too, and even have webhooks. So I won't go into these. I recommend looking at them. They may provide use for you, but they definitely have some interesting integrations that I would recommend looking at. So here, now that we've gotten back to our Postman API integration, in order to get started, we're just going to click Generate API Key. It's very simple. We'll call this, there we go, YouTube test. So I click Generate API Key, and now we have the API key we're looking for. So in order for me to use that, I better save it, or I'll copy it twice. And now that I have the API key, I'm basically ready to go. So I will go ahead and save that in a note here on my computer. And now just to continue, before we actually start consuming it and almost ready to consume it, we're going to go back to our Postman API documentation and have a very quick overview on how it looks. So before we get into that, we're going to go into a couple more things. So with rate limits, we have a certain amount of time we can call a Postman API per minute. In this case, it's 60 requests per minute. So unless you're some kind of enterprise that's doing way more than 60 requests per minute, you should, be mostly fine with that. Additionally, we have about 1,000 API calls we can do per month. So that's something to keep in mind as well. That's probably more easily to hit than 60 requests per minute. And then lastly, they have a support page. So for emailing them at help@getpostman.com, or a Discord community if you like doing chats. Now we can get started with our API reference. So as noted, everything in here is it's a RESTful API, meaning that things are organized in terms of like objects. So a collection is an object, an environment is an object, a mock is an object, monitors, workspaces, and user is an object. Import, more of a function, but we'll get to that later. So what you do on objects is the create, read, and update operations, as we've talked about, and delete. So you will definitely see that here as we go ahead and click down. So we're going to get started with collections. What we can do with collections is obtain all of them, obtain a single collection if we're using an identifier, and that's generally something is called a URI parameter right here. We can create a collection, update a collection, and delete a collection. So exactly very much the same thing that I talked about. Not really much to get into here, other than when we try this out in Postman, it'll make more sense. But in general, these are just the types of operations that you're allowed to do on all of these objects. So we'll go ahead and continue on to environments and show you basically the same exact thing, where we can get all the environments, get a single environment with a URI parameter, create an environment, update an environment, that would also require a URI parameter, and delete an environment. Again, another URI parameter for that, and as you can see here. Mocks have the same thing, except that we cannot update a mock. And so the other way to really update it is to delete it and then create it. But that's really it with mocks, very similar. Monitors, almost exactly the same, except we have one more additional feature with monitors where we can just invoke a monitor to run immediately. So let's say you're using Newman, for example, and you're running a build, and then you run a test within your build pipeline, and let's say all the tests, they're running successfully, etc. And let's say you just want to kick off a monitor just to monitor this version of the API that's been deployed. Well, you can do that with run a monitor here. And we'll click this one since it's different. And all it is using the monitor UID and /run. And that'll set the monitor to run depending on the time we put in there. But again, the other operations are exactly the same as other objects. Lastly, we get into workspaces. Same thing, creating workspaces, deleting workspaces, updating workspaces, reading workspaces. So the only ones that are slightly different are user and import. So user here is just very informational. So if I put in the API.getpostman.com/me and make a call there, this just gets information about the API key owner being me, that owner myself. And then lastly, we have two things we can do with an import. One is saying, hey, if you've ever used a Open API, which formerly was called Swagger, it is a way to define documentation using JSON or YAML, and it'll actually create your API scaffolding based on that information. And so it's very useful, and I would recommend even learning about it. But let's say you want to put that into Postman so that it'll create your scaffolding Postman collection for you. You can do that. I believe you can only do this with JSON though, and not YAML. I may be wrong. And then lastly, we can also import exported data. So yes, JSON. Okay. So importing exported data is just saying, hey, when you've exported data within Postman as a collection or as an environment or just any exported data at all, we can import that back in using this API. So it's, again, also very useful. And that really wraps it up in terms of what we can see here. So we're going to go and move back to a Postman collection, and we're going to go through creating, updating, deleting, and reading a Postman collection using the Postman API. And so to get started here, what's nice about Postman documentation is that they have generally a button at the top that says Run in Postman. So now, instead of me manually copying over this whole API and everything about it, I just click Run in Postman, and it's going to load right in Postman for me. So I click Postman for Mac. And we should see here any moment. There we go. At the top left-hand corner here, we have Postman API. And so in this case, we're going to work with just collections. So here we have get all collections. It already has the header for us in there, and it already has a reference for us for a Postman API key. Notice that it is a collection variable. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my notes here and copy this Postman ID out, my API key, excuse me. We'll edit the collection. And now we should be good to go. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we should only get one collection back since we have just the, well, two actually, Postman API and Postman Echo. Oh, and here we are. So you could see here the getting all collections just returns an array of collections in JSON. Here's our Postman API collection, and then our Postman Echo. Next one, we'll take a look at getting a single collection. So now that we've gotten a collection before, we can just use the UID of the collection. Actually, I believe it's just the collection. Yeah, collection UID. So we'll go ahead and use the collection UID here. And click send. And we'll notice all the information about this collection. You know, everything about the description, everything within there, including the APIs that we can invoke, or the endpoints, whatever you want to call them. So this is, again, very useful. And now we can move on to creating a collection, which is going to be a bit different. So what we'll do is we'll create a collection based off of a sample one we have. So, perfect. So it already pre-populates this with us, or for us, with a Postman Echo get. So this makes it very easy for us to just show this as an example. So actually, all I'll have to do really is just click send, and I'm going to have my own sample collection. So we'll go ahead and click that. And now we have sample collection 296 with that UID. And you'll notice right here, it showed up. And we have a folder with a sample post and a sample get. So very nice. You can see, I hope you're starting to see the power of what we can do here with this. Now we'll do an update. And hopefully it already has that filled out for us as well. So in order for me to really show this by example, I'm going to change information in here. So this is a sample GET request, YouTube demo. And all I'll need here is just the actual UID of this collection. So I'll go ahead and copy that out. We'll do a put here and then paste over that. We'll go ahead and send. So it looks like it went through okay. You noticed it actually changed the ID of the collection as well to another random integer. And if we look at the description, I believe it was for this GET request, we should have more information. And we'll go at the bottom here, there we go. Sample GET request. There we go. And we see YouTube demo come up there. So that's all been modified according to the update. And now I say we've had our time with this collection. We're going to go ahead and just delete it real quick and say goodbye. Now you can see it completely disappeared within here. And so if I do another get to all collections, we should get back basically what we have here. Yep, so now that collection has been completely wiped out from existence in our Postman workspace. And there you have it. That's a good example of using the Postman API and shows you how its RESTful standards are really implicit within the Postman's API. So if you really have any, thoughts or questions on this or things that need more explanation, I'd really encourage you to go to the comments and feel free to ask those. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like this content, especially with API tools and IT tools and technologies, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and be sure you hit the bell for notifications. In the next video, we're going to go through advanced Postman scripting. In particular, this will be using XML-based scripting. So this is definitely a little more advanced and not something you find out of the box and takes time to work with. Feel free to follow me on the next video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there.